Okay, some of the general differences I want to talk about after I just walked you through my A universal field theory for resumes is, again, how you reference your exact application is an invention. You're going to be slightly different than somebody else. You're going to have a slightly different pattern. You're going to be older than somebody else. You're going to be younger than somebody else. You're going to have different formal education, your grade point. I mean, when you put all those numbers together, there's a very good chance that somebody could be so close on paper that I can't tell the difference, but that becomes a flaw. Not everybody that is perfect with the same application fits perfectly because of how far they have to travel, or just weird stuff that you would never expect to matter. The photon in the box here. This is the SCP report, intelligence report. The quick one. Just a couple of pages, front and back, right here. One piece of paper. And I've worked it out to the art of war, and then, well, if you wanted to, how quotes and quatrains. They are religions. It's education of a different form. It's teaching you new states without ever having to stand there and do them. I know scales and landscaping, so it gives me more of an advantage to fill in more particles of that universe when somebody puts me on a new piece of machinery, because I have a lot of that stuff already understood. They're little calculations, they're surrounding this walled fortress because I'm trying to, of a different form. Okay. In the same way, this 2-pager is the exact same thing as a 256 model that I actually did. And it might have had my full work history, some general mathematics, the S.T.E.M and Millennium problems. Some of them do repeat each other, but you want to reduce a lot of that. Obviously, if you just went through all algebra, all trigonometry, all physics equations, subatomic periodic equations, the Hadron Collider, your book would be this big. Obviously, too much information. A, B equals B, A. A is an abruptly long sequence. We're just trying to reduce this down to a specific Newtonian pattern that specifically equals 0. In this form, Rhodes, Beals, Fermat's, Riemann's hypothesis on number patterns. Again, I'm going to draw this out to 10. I'm just going to go A, B, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever kind of combination you want that to look like. One's a manager, one's a laborer, but basically they're still the same thing. A manager has to know those skills. Those skills will refer to a company that still has a manager, and if you don't have that guy doing it, obviously no manager, no company, no connection between the two. But they're very different, even though they're made up of 25 and 16 and 42, or whether they're prime or not. We're just dealing with real numbers at that point, overlapping them in stack dimension theory by Einstein. Again, it's complicated. Just look around. Look at that real business. Look at that real invention you're doing. Look at the real pattern of something, your home life, sitting around. What makes that all up? They're group states. I'm good with this. I play video games. They're numbers, essentially, but irrational. They don't really have a specific number that backs that up. It's generalized when you say there's this many points inside of it. That's maybe what that form looks like, but again, there are Ohm's law inside of that and calculations that you'd never expect to really be applied in there. The circuitry of me playing with this paddle still, it looks like a point I didn't at the general labor level, if you will. Ohm's law doesn't look like it's applying, but it applies in the video game about resistance and force and all kinds of different things that you're dealing with. When you're a quantum mechanics expert, you gotta do them in all those positions, and then the state opens up, and it's supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. After that first point, it breaks down that second point, and then that second point, 1, and then you hit that again, and they all line up in this perfect matrix, which don't buy too much into that fucking hype. It's more realistic about what looks like a resume, what looks like a process, what looks like, physical labor. And again, that can be, this 2-pager or this 256-pager or more, the cumulative knowledge of everything that's in a library, just the way it is. All of them, every book in there is a process, even fictional. A library that contains of all of those things It's a process. What's the difference? Nothing by that value. When you start to add something to it, they start to get farther and farther away from each other. Here's a reality with as far as they get away from each other, each of them are still going to have something that references a general work history and a special point about it. You know, your specific job, if you do scale, dimensions, and drawings, or whatever to that, what that invention may look like, which is basically the work history. I knew the process A, it went to B. Now I'm just reciting that in a different scale, in a different form, in a specialized version of it, which is Planck spectrums. That becomes something that's parallel to a small business platform. And this idea, again, it's still a work history, nothing more, nothing fancier than that, but what the appeared model of what a stacked dimension may look like. You know, when I did mine, the mathematics was the general bit, which you can find in a lot of my things, usually just as practice, just so it helps me memorize it. I do them all. My big whatever. A general universal field theory about seed, stem, and swag. A bank of terms on a Rhodes conjecture, or excuse me, a universal field theory in mathematics. A Rhodes conjecture, Fermat's last theorem, Beal's conjecture, Ying's-Mills mass gap, on a new fundamental idea of physics and mathematics is a landscaper's map. When you can make that landscaper's map quantum mechanics, you've bridged this mass gap, or this spark gap, if you like Tesla better. And that's why I didn't put Tesla in here. That's why I chose a different direction of it, because this language, A's and B's and X's and Y's, all group together very well and have a AX, BX, AX, BY, CZ function. Alright. The Ying's-Mills mass gap, the P versus NP problem, erodes first, or excuse me, that concept on the A series, or jumping into Tesla's work. Both of them the same thing. Which one comes first? If I need one of those, if I chose one of those things, do I have to put those other ones because of basic substitution, transposition would make a better idea than actually physically placing in Newton's work, or 30 different work histories that do the same thing. You know, obviously they're different. There might have been a different scale, time systems that made all that up. But do I need all that? There might have been one special feature in there that I could pull out and put into a special edition at the bottom of something to make it one group, or a better equation, or how that equation functions better. Totally possible. Have you ever done that in a company, brought that one thing in to improve the situation that you were working in? Think about it. Again, how I write those out, you know, all this happy. This is one of my favorites, from general relativity and special relativity. This is a second. This is that half a second that leads up to that next second. And in terms of this transitioning back halfway through that first second to determine where you're going to go farther, it starts to diverge and everything like that about this corner basis of, you know, this 0 point, or this a photon, electron, person, you know, they are at the quantum level the same thing. Very stable boson. As unstable as the molecular instability may reference for that. Even physical labor. Alright, that's the job I'm doing. It may not seem really good, but I can plan this out to become better at that system, to work in machinery that makes it easier, to make this more mechanical. And when you have a mechanical advantage over a situation, usually it's better than using brute force. Better, it can be, not always. Sometimes it drags out if you don't plan all that in there, that 001 bit, or that 00 whatever. Basic noting, how long those systems or groups need to be. Aristotle and common sense physics. And then what I begin is, I went a full work history. Every one of my jobs on a quick little, this is the brief description. Now, I've never seen one Usually it takes one 5x8 piece of paper to all the group states that I did, the general prefix, and then make you do that on an application that's a space this big. When I go to a place, usually I look at that. Here's the name, the add phone number, the address. I have all that worked out. AX, BX, and then I get to the bank of terms. This is the numbers that are names that I'll have to process that equal not 0 or 1, but me getting that job 001. And you don't there's no substitution of real experience. You can know this number all day. You can fake that bullshit all day. I know managerial skills. I know maintenance, but it's not going to make you damn bit a difference if you don't actually know what those numbers transition into in the real world. Just labor. Just physically processing what's really there in front of you, given that new company, given that new example. This is a generalist command directive. I've seen officers do this. I've seen laborers have to do this in time charts about what the XYZ forms are, and just go get that inventory. That inventory is specifically for that machine they're doing, just like the manager collects all those inventories and writes all those down into a cost sheet or what have you. The same thing. Sometimes it's more processing. It looks like more stack dimension, but they're equal. This one's doing something, this one's doing something, and there's no way to separate those two. Laws of motion. If you've really studied the laws of motion, both sides of it, both that how they are equal, but in a stack dimension theory, you could say something like general troop. Without troops, you have no generals. Without generals, you have no troops. From there, I actually went, things like whether you start with a small business, which is an invention, or an invention. Several inventions, whatever fills out a certain group state into this idea. And you generally have to know some of that, but also how this is building in this stack dimension theory. After those, I chose a command directive. One of my invention patent systems about the command directive of how they work is a substitution transmission code I call the Four Horsemen Night Store Cipher Hypercubing Grid. All right, quantum mechanics. You got a number position. You're correlating a letter system to it, and maybe a psychological trigger that says it changes, or a large bank of them to determine on the crew training which one we're using right at that moment. And the substitution of one of those ideas is what makes it uncrackable. Just like quantum mechanics. Why do we have such a big problem with it? Because using laborers to this idea is a substitution pattern only given the certain training model that we're doing. Why labor jobs aren't as important as science jobs. Well, they're both general labor, but there is no such thing as general labor. For me, then I went to a few other things, a brief description. Again, I want this written out to be the form, the number, the name, the concept, several definitions, or a specific note pattern. And you can do a lot of them in the Military Joint Chief of Staff Dictionary of Terms, or a S.T.E.M Dictionary of Terms. Engineering Dictionary is a S.T.E.M Dictionary of Terms. Chemistry Dictionary is a S.T.E.M Dictionary of Terms. Given the seed, we're using chemistry, which is a science, a technology that is specifically engineered to the number pattern, chemistry, engineering, military, whatever. I've done this with Spanish language. Go through a Spanish dictionary and just study those things. When you're ready, you can just flip through yours. I remember basically some of that stuff, and it's going to make it way faster for me, causally. But if you don't write it out, it's not going to help you. You might read it's going to help you calligraphy and study if you have that dictionary with you. But basically, you made one that's better bullet pointed. You don't need all this extra information. It doesn't apply to the language, bathroom, food in Spanish because I'm lost in Mexico or whatever. As a general, you might need to know this shit. From there, syndicate design, and again, that's business models, or I did a special one for you, and it's going to be hard for me to describe, but after that, the art of war. When you know that the art of war is going to take up that much of the back of this book, and you have to position all your work histories on a given scale, and things like that, that's just like figuring out how much not to add, because they should know it common sense about this. You got to know the end result before you start. Catch you on the next one.